All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Sorry, some technical difficulties. Sorry for the delay. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning share. To thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsor and your TALMUD TORAH sponsor for Tafshin Pei 5785, the Tilson Family, for dedicating all the shiurim and drashos this year as a zechus for besuros, tovos for Am Yisroel, and our TALMUD TORAH sponsor for the month of Teves Haba Alinu L'Tova, the Kelman Mishpacha, for dedicating all the shiurim and drashos this month in memory of Amit Ben David Levy, Zichron Livracha, a strong and valiant soldier who died al Kiddush Hashem, fighting in Gaza on the first night of Chanukah. We hope that his neshama has an aliyah, his family in Necham. We hope that in the merit of our learning, that Ribbon Shalom brings all of our hostages home b'shalom and b'karov, and that our holy soldiers are successful b'chol ma'aseh yedehem. With that, let us begin. Today's daf is Chav Ches 28. We are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Chav Zayin Amud Beis. A lot to do today. We are picking up at the Mishnah in Meretz Hashem. So brand new sugya ahead of us today. V'elu hein hakrov. So remember again, one of the things that we've established is that a karov, a relative, is not permitted to go ahead and adjudicate a case. So that's both serving as a dayan, as a judge, as well as going ahead and as well as sometimes just doesn't want to work. All right. As well as going ahead and serving as an aide. So the Mishnah says, who are the krovim? V'elu heina krovim. These are the relatives. Achiv, a brother, v'achi aviv, and father's brother, uncle, v'achi imo, mother's brother, ubal acho. So this like triggers some of us for Yavamas, right? Sounds like ubal acho. So and brother-in-law, the husband of his sister, ubal achos aviv, and the husband of father's sister, an uncle, ubal achos imo, and the husband of the mother's brother, ubal imo. And the husband, balimo means mother's husband, v'chamov, a father-in-law, v'giso, a brother-in-law, hein ubneyen v'chasneyen, them, their sons, as well as their sons-in-law. V'chargo, so we'll say chargo levad. Now we're going to say chargo is a stepson. So we'll discuss in Meretz Hashem this very interesting case about what the case of stepson is. V'chargo levado. And ultimately, again, a brother-in-law or a stepson, levado. Levado means no other associated relatives. Again, we'll get into that in the Gemara in just a little bit. Rabbi Yossi says, this up what we learned up until this point. This is the Mishnah. This is the statement of Rabbi Akiva about Mishnah Rishona. But again, in the first iteration of this halacha, dodo o ben dodo v'chalarai liyarsho. Ultimately, again, an uncle, the son of your uncle, and anyone who is in line to inherit. So I'll say, this is interesting. So the first version of this, and again, we'll get into all this obviously in the Gemara, but again, the first version of this is Rabbi Akiva. Afterwards, again, they really made this about inheritance. That whoever ultimately, again, is in line to inherit, that ultimately is apostle Eidos as well. Now, interestingly enough, also, what's the definition of a relative? Definition of a relative is someone who is related to you at the time of the adjudication of the case. For example, if someone was related to you, but they are no longer technically related to you, so they are kasher le'edas. For example, haya karov v'nisrachek harei kasher. If you were married, if you were related to someone, and then ultimately again you were distanced from them, so again that would be a case, let's say, of divorce. Or we'll see death in just a moment as well. So halacha l'maisa, even if you were related to someone, but now you're not related to that person, halacha l'maisa, the individual is kasher for edus. Rabbi Yehuda says, afilu meisa bito. Rabbi Yehuda gives an example of this. Afilu meisa bito. So let's say again, a person has a daughter. The daughter marries a guy, right? They have a child. Then what happens? The v'yeshlo banim mimena. And now what happens? They have children, and then the daughter dies. So we'll say, so let's say again, so Reuven has a daughter, Reuven's daughter marries Shimon, and then Reuven's daughter dies. So is Reuven related to Shimon? Reuven related to Shimon? Technically speaking, no. Right? Technically speaking, no, because at the end of the day, Reuven's relation to Shimon is because Shimon is the husband of his daughter. If the daughter is dead, then technically speaking, Reuven is not related to Shimon. But yet again, interestingly enough, the Mishnah says, Harei Zakarov. They are still considered to be relatives really because of the presence of grandchildren, right? The existence of grandchildren, by definition, links them. Okay, ha'ohev v'asoni. This is a fascinating case. So we'll say ohev v'asoni means a very close friend or a very close enemy. I don't know if you have a very close enemy or an intense enemy. An intense enemy. So the Gemara says these individuals are also pasal eidos. So this is interesting. What's the definition of an ohev? So an ohev ze shoshvino. So we'll say, so an ohev is someone who is like your groomsman. Now Rashi points out something interesting over here. He says, shoshvino pasal lo bimechu pasal. This is a person ultimately, again, so shoshvino means one of your groomsmen. This individual is pasal le'edus during the days of the wedding. In other words, during the wedding party itself, and again, with some zechus ksuvas, the wedding celebration itself would be an extended thing. So during the days of the chasana, so this individual would be pasal le'edus. Sone was the definition of an enemy. Interestingly enough, kol shelo diber imo shlosha yamim be'eva. So this is fascinating. So this is anyone who you have not spoken to for 3 days because of animosity, right? In other words, once you hear this, it could very well be able to speak to someone for 3 days, right? But if I'm dafka not speaking to them for 3 days because of animosity, that's called an oyev. That's called an enemy. And these individuals, again, I will say, so obviously, the ohev, the very close friend, right, the close friend, is not believed to testify on my behalf because he's a very close friend. The enemy is also not believed to testify or adjudicate on my behalf because he's my enemy. Amrle, so he responded back to him, no. Lo nechshadu Yisrael al kach. That's not how Jews operate. Lo nechshadu, so Rashi says over here, Lo nechshadu Yisrael al kach, lo ha'id sheker mishum eva vi'ava. V'dafka be'edus, please. So say, interestingly enough, so he responded, Klal Yisrael is not chashish for that. That's not how we operate. No one's going to lie because they love someone or because they hate someone. We're not choshesh or something like that. Okay, we'll see that machlokas is exactly in the Gemara. Suppose say Gemara. So from how do we know this? Now, from how do we know what? From where do we know this concept that relatives are not believed to go ahead and adjudicate the case? Where exactly is that concept? Where exactly is that concept known from? So the Gemara says as follows. Torah says that fathers shall not die because of their sons. So the Gemara says, what does this mean? So if you want to tell me that it's coming to teach me that a father is not held responsible, a father is not going to die because of the sins of his son, and a son is not going to die because of the sins of his father. The Torah is teaching about responsibility. So I already know that. Nemar, ish becheto yumsu. A person dies because of his own sins. A person is not going to be held accountable because of the sins of someone else. Okay? So lo yumsu avos abanim. So what does it mean when it says that fathers won't die because of their sons? Be'edus banim. It means because of the testimony of their sons. Ubanim lo yumsu alavos. And sons won't die because of their fathers. Be'edus avos, because of the testimony of their fathers. Okay, so we'll say this. So this is the makar. So how do we know that again relatives can't testify, right, for each other and in cases involving each other? Because the pasuk says again, lo yumsu avos abanim ubanim alavosam. Right, ultimately fathers can't die because of their sons. Sons can't die because of their fathers. Indicates to us that testimony cannot be given from father to son or from son to father. So the Gemara says, 1 second. Ubanim ba'avos ba'avon avos lo. So now the Gemara kind of made a declarative statement that fathers don't die for the sons, fathers don't die for the sins of their sons, and sons don't die for the sins of their fathers. The Gemara made that as a declarative statement. Ish bechato yombas. People only die for their own sins. The Gemara says, is that true? V'haksiv poket avon avos al banim. There's a pasuk. The pasuk says that Hashem will visit the sins of the fathers on the sons, which sounds like children can be held responsible for the sins of their fathers. To which the Gemara says, no. Hasam kisha ochsin maase avosehen biadehen. That's where the fathers engage in sinful behavior, and the children decide to perpetuate that very same behavior. That is where there is going to be responsibility for the sins of the fathers on the sons. In other words, when the fathers engage in sinful behaviors and the sons choose to perpetuate those behaviors, then there is responsibility upon the sons, not only for their behaviors, but also for the behaviors of their fathers. What does it mean when it says also for the iniquities, for the sins of their fathers, they will be held accountable? When the sons decide to perpetuate the sinful deeds of their fathers. So Ata Omer Kisha Ochsin Ata Omer Kisha Ochsin O Eina Ela Kisha Ein Ochsin. So maybe you'll say, how do you know that it's only sons are responsible for the sins of their fathers when they perpetuate those very same deeds? Maybe sons are in general responsible for the sins of their fathers. Kishu Omer Ish Bechet O Yamos. Because the pasuk says each person only dies for his own sin. Hare Kisha Ochsin Maaseh Avosehen Biadehen. You see from here that halacha l'maisa, sons in general are not held responsible for the sins of the fathers, but unless, of course, halacha l'maisa, they continue to perpetuate those very same averos. So I'll just point out something really incredible over here. You see this dynamic on one hand, right? On one hand, so the sons are not held responsible for the sins of the fathers, but yet, if the sons perpetuate the sinful behaviors of the father, the sons are responsible. So I'll say, what do you see from here? What you see from here is something fascinating, that we know this in life. You don't choose the family you're born into. You don't choose your parents. And a lot of times it can happen that a person is born into a dysfunctional situation. And sometimes a person is even born into a sinful situation. What Chazal are sensitizing us to is, while it's true that you don't get to choose your upbringing, but you absolutely get to choose the life you want to create for yourself. In other words, perpetuating dysfunction is a choice. Growing up with dysfunction is not a choice. But at a certain point in time, a person has bechira, a person has free choice about the life they want to live and the person they want to be. If you don't make changes in yourself, that is on you. So to be brought up in a sinful home, okay, what are you going to do? You can't choose where you're brought up. But at a certain point in time, kisha'ochzin ma'aseh avosehen, when you choose to perpetuate the same behaviors you were brought up with, that's on you. That's on you. At a certain point, the Chodesh Baruch Hu says, you know better. You know better. You know differently. You do not have to continue down that same road of spiritual dysfunction. You could choose something different for yourself. And failing to choose something different for yourself creates personal responsibility. I will say this is such a tremendous yisod, because people spend a whole lifetime blaming their parents for everything that goes wrong in their life. My father didn't do this. My mother didn't do this. My upbringing was like this. And by the way, they might be 100% right. They might have had the worst parents in the world. Or even if they didn't have the worst parents in the world, it could be that the home life was really dysfunctional. And there's a lot, there could be a lot to others. Freud wasn't the first person to discover that a lot of who and what we are is dependent on our relationship with our parents. Chazal knew this long before that. But there does come a moment where a person has to make a choice about who they want to be in life going forward. Maybe my parents did mess me up. It's possible. But l'maisa, now I have to make a choice. Do I want to be ochiz ma'aseh avosein or not? Do I want to perpetuate that? Or do I want something different for myself? When Chazal are teaching us over here is such a lesson of empowerment. It is so tempting to think that, you know what, the way you were brought up, that's the way you're going to be. And Chazal come along and say, no. If you were fortunate to have a good chinuch, zechisa. But sometimes a person wasn't fortunate to have a good chinuch. But then there comes a point in time where you got to choose what you want for yourself. You can't spend your life blaming your parents. At a certain point in time, you have to decide who and what you want to be and take responsibility for the life you're going to lead. It's incredible. So the Gemara says, Velo, 1 second, is that true? Is that true that you're not held responsible for other people's averos? But what about V'hak siv, v'kishlu ish ba'achiv? The pasuk says literally again, a person will stumble. Quoting over here the pasuk from Vayikra, the TORAH, v'kishlu ish ba'achiv, a person will stumble over his fellows. So the Gemara says, what does this talk about? Ish ba'avon achiv. It means one Jew stumbles over the sins of another Jew. What does this teach me? Malamed shekulon arevin zebazeh. So we'll say, what does this teach us? This teaches us that halacha l'maisa, that each of us are responsible for each other. In other words, we'll say this is the concept, Kol Yisrael arevim zebazeh. Zebazeh, we are all responsible for one another. So doesn't that mutual responsibility mean that I could be held accountable for your sins, you could be held accountable for my sins? To which the Gemara says, no. Hasam shahaya b'yadam limchos v'lo michu. That's what I say, when is there accountability for each other's sins? So that's when halacha l'maisa, there was the ability to object to someone else's negative behavior and you didn't do so. Rabbi says, this is profound. When I see someone doing something wrong and I don't do anything to object, And when we say object is, I don't do anything to try to help them from making this mistake. I share in the responsibility for their avera. I share in that responsibility. But again, and that's when, if I don't do anything, again, like I said, I share in that responsibility. If on the other hand, someone's coming in avera, and I don't really have the ability to do anything about it, to object or to do anything, then there's no responsibility. So I just want to point out, this is even a different concept. So this is the concept of arvos. Remember again, a guarantorship. Kol Yisrael even zebazeh. We are all responsible for each other, and especially if I see you doing something, you see me doing something, and we can intervene, but we don't. Failure to intervene creates responsibility for the commission of the avera. I just want to point out something very interesting over here, which is if you notice, you'll often find this phrase written two different ways. There's Kol Yisrael Arevim Ze Loze and Ze Baze. So interestingly enough, that's because the word Arevim could be understood in two different ways. Arevim could be understood as a guarantorship, a guarantorship. Each of us is the guarantor for the other. So therefore, again, if you're doing something wrong, and I could have stepped in and prevented that or helped that, and I don't, just like a guarantor is on the hook if the borrower defaults, so too, again, we are responsible. But remember again, arevin is also a lashon of taroves, also a lashon of a mixture. And again, that's why you'll find ze baze and ze loze. When it's used ultimately, again, in the context of a guarantorship, so it's often called arevim ze la ze. We are a guarantor one for the other. But it also means, taroves means a mixture. That means kol Yisrael arevim ze ba ze. There is a mixture of Klal Yisrael. We are all one mixture. So I saw so beautiful. I actually saw it earlier this morning. The Yismach Moshe, the Rebbe of Siget, says something so beautiful. He said, listen to this. He says, Arevin hainu mi'uravim zebazeh. The Klal Yisrael is like more like a taroves, a mixture. And he says, Im echad rotze liros es atzmo. If you want to see how you're doing in life, generally you want to kind of like get like a little bit of a measurement where you're holding in your spiritual life. Look at your friend, and what do you see? What do you see when you look at another Yid? If all you see are the shortcomings, and all you see is the negativity, and all you see are all the things that are broken, every Jew is your mirror. So if that's what you're seeing in someone else, then in reality, that's what's happening inside of you. That's Kol Yisrael Arevim Ze Bazeh. We are a taroves. We are a mixture. And that's why I will say again, sometimes it is the most dangerous thing in the world when we speak negatively about different factions or different groups within Klal Yisrael, even if we vehemently oppose them. We are all mirror images of each other. There is a taroves, there is a mixture. So if you look at another Yid and you see something terrible and you see something horrible and you see something that you just don't terribly understand, part of that is your reflection. Part of that negativity is what you're seeing. That's why I will say you see the greatest tzaddikim. If you notice this, by the way, the greatest tzaddikim often possess what? Or I would say differently. What is the greatest metric? What makes a tzaddik a tzaddik? We know what makes a tzaddik a tzaddik. It's not the amount of Torah that you learn. Anyone can learn a lot of Torah. The greatest metric of a tzaddik is Avas Yisrael. Avas Yisrael. When you are able to love every single Jew, that means that you see the beauty in every Jew. When you see the beauty in every Jew, that means that's a reflection of you. So when you see the beauty in every single Yid, that's because you yourself possess all of that beauty. Conversely, when you dislike that one, dislike this one, can't stomach this one, can't make eye contact with this one, that's a reflection of something broken inside of me. Someone who possesses true Avas Yisrael is able to see the beauty. It doesn't mean that there aren't imperfections, things wrong, or things broken in other Yidden. But that's what it means to have, that's what it means to be a tzaddik. To be able to see beauty means that beauty is reflected from me into the individual, from the other individual into thee. So just two different concepts. Kol Yisrael Arevim Ze Bazeh, Kol Yisrael Arevim Ze Lozeh. We are guarantors for one another. That's the Gemara saying over here, that Allah L'maisa, if someone else sins, and I don't do anything to stop it, I am responsible for that. But Arevim Zebazeh, we are also a mixture. And what you see in another Jew is often a reflection of what's happening inside of me. Incredible. Ashkechan avos labanim ubaram la'avos v'koshekin avos la'adadi. So I understand now that again, sons can't testify on behalf of the father, father can't on behalf of the son. That's what we just did, and all the more so avos la'adadi. Avos la'adadi means brothers for each other. Banam labanim minalan hanam ba cousins. That cousins can't testify for each other. In kein lichtov kra lo yumsu avos al ben. Pasuk could have just said a father can't be put to death by the son. My banim. What's banim? So the Gemara says, "Da'afilu banim lahadadi." Even cousins for each other can't go ahead and testify. Ashkechan banim lahadadi, banim la'alma minala. So we'll say, so now the cousins and relatives, for that matter, can't testify for each other. How do I know that relatives can't form a testimonial unit to testify on behalf of someone else? How do I know that? Amarai barchama svarahu. It's a svara. What's the svara? Kidisanya, as we learned. Ein ha'idim nasin zolomin ad she'azumu shneihen. So remember again, Edim Zolomin can't become Edim can't become Zomin until both of them become Zomin. Right? Again, we have this again. We'll see this in Zechus Malkus. Actually, very exciting. Malkus next. Yeah, Malkus is next. Very exciting. And Meretz Hashem. So we'll say so. We will see that witnesses only become Edim Zomin if the testimonial unit is made into Edim. In other words, you could disqualify a singular witness, but if you want to make Edim Zomimin, you have to go ahead and be mazim the group. So the Gemara says, say if you would think that in general relatives have the ability to testify. Again, I will say, I just want to point out what's happening over here. Up until this point, what we've proven is that relatives can't testify for or against each other. Now we pivoted a little bit. How do I know that relatives can't form a testimonial unit to testify for or on behalf of someone else, right? Brothers, cousins, uncles, right? Can't be a unit. So the Gemara says, so remember again, witnesses only become zomin until both of them become zomin. The Gemara says, if you would think that again, relatives in general can testify on behalf of someone else, then it could turn out that you could have relatives making another relative into an Eid Zomim, and halacha l'maisa, then potentially in a capital case where again Eid Zomim are executed, it would turn out that one person is executed based on the testimony of a relative. Okay, Armali Rav lo tamech. Rav is going to your logic. Lo tamech, according to this logic, hadislan, that's which we learn. Shlosha achin. If you have three brothers, ve'echa mistayfei mahen, and one person is combining with them, hare gimel edios. These are three different testimonies. Now, what's the case over here? Take a look at Rashi. Rashi is right across to the right. Shlosha achin ve'echad min hashuk im kol echad ve'echad. Suppose you have three brothers, Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi. Now, there's another guy. We'll call him Avram. Avram's been living on a piece of land for 3 years. Okay? Yitzchak comes along and says, hey, Avram, get off my property. Avram says, what are you talking about? I've been using this property uncontested for 3 years, and I have witnesses. Now, interestingly enough, the way his testimony works is like this. There's one witness. We'll call him Yehuda. Yehuda, the one witness, has seen Avram living on that land for 3 years straight, uncontested. The problem is, Yehuda is an Eid Echad. He is an Eid Echad. But so what does Yehuda have? But then there are three brothers. Ruvain saw Avram living there year one, uncontested. Shimon saw Avram living there year two, uncontested. And Levi saw Avram living there year three, uncontested. So now what we want to do is like this. We want to have Yehuda, who is the witness who saw all 3 years, combined with each of the brothers for their respective year, and that will give Avram 3 years of testimony of uncontested use of the property. Now look at Rashi. Rashi says, Shlosha achan ve'echad min hashok. So there are three brothers, right? That's Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, and one guy. We'll call him Yehuda. Unrelated, right? In kol echad ve'echad me'idim ala achilas shnei chazakan. And together, all of these guys testify about the fact that Avram used the land uncontested for 3 years. So the Gemara says, Al karkasha adam min hashok umeyit echad min ha'achin v'haba min hashok al shana rishona ve'echad min ha'achin v'haba min hashok al shana shniya v'ashlishi al shlishis v'harei ilu shalosh edyos v'chazaka kayemes. So I will say, interestingly enough, This works. This works. This is considered to be three distinct testimonial units. In other words, Reuven with Yehuda's unit is group 1. Shimon with Yehuda's group 2. Levi with Yehuda's group 3. And together, they establish the chazaka of Avraham. I'm just finishing Rashi. We don't say that this is one testimonial unit. So interestingly enough, even though these are three brothers, right? You might say to yourself, oh, it's one testimonial unit, and it's invalid because it's three brothers. Kamashal, no. We look at this as three different testimonies, and therefore it's unrelated testimony, and therefore it's kosher. So the Gemara says as follows. Interestingly enough, but fascinatingly enough, halacha l'maisa, they are considered to be one testimonial unit for hazama purposes. So the Gemara says, Nimsa eid zom mishali mamon be'edos achiv. So I'll say, so again, here's the problem. The problem, therefore, it turns out that halacha l'maisa, because they're one testimonial unit, so one brother will end up having to pay based on hazama, based on the testimony of a relative. Ella hazama me'alma kasi. Rather, what you have to say is as follows. Ultimately, again, hazama is different. Hazama is not considered to be that they're paying on behalf of each other. Hazama is considered to be something that comes externally and then is imposed on the respective groups. They are not considered to be linked, even though they all suffer the same hazama punishment. They are not considered to be involved in each other's hazama process. Hachanami hazame amakasi. Fine. Ela imkein luchtov kra uben al avos. If that's the case, the pasuk could have just said a son on his father's. Inami heim al avos. My ubanim. Why does it say ubanim? Afilu banim la'alma. It means that relatives can't form a testimonial unit to go ahead and testify in general about other things as well. So therefore, both say, essentially from the same pasuk, although different derivations from the same pasuk, we learn two things. Number one, relatives, and we define relatives in the Mishnah, can't testify for each other. And not only that, but in part number 2, or lesson 2, relatives can't form a testimonial unit to go ahead and testify for something else. In other words, they can't combine to testify for someone or something else. Fine. Ashkechan krovei av. So up until now, we've been focused on relatives of the father, paternal relatives. Krovei eminala, because we also remember again, the lashon of the pasuk that we're using is lo yumsu avos al banim ubanim al avosam, fathers and sons, and from there we derive other paternal relatives. How do I know that the disqualification for relatives applies to maternal relatives as well? So the Gemara says, Amarkra avos trezimni. It says avos twice. So the Gemara says, Im eino inyan lekrovei ha'av. So if I don't need it to teach me relatives of the father, so the Gemara says, Tzino the inyan krovei ha'im. Then use it to teach me relatives of the mother. Beautiful. Ashkechan l'chova. So I understand that these individuals can't testify for what we'll call like indictment purposes, guilt purposes. The zechus minala. How do I know even? So we'll say, I understand they can't testify against each other in order to go ahead and for like a guilty purpose. How do I know even for an exoneration purpose? Amakra yumsu yumos trezimni. Says they can't be put to death twice. It's interesting. So it says it's fascinating drasha. So again, if one yumsu teaches me that they can't go ahead and testify against each other for culpability purposes. What do you use the other yumsu from? Even for exoneration purposes. Okay. Ashkechan b'dinei nefashos. So I understand that they can't testify each other in capital cases. B'dinei mamanes minal. How do I know even in financial cases? Amakra mishpat echad yiyeh lochem. Torah says when it comes to testimony, there's one mishpat. Mishpat hashaveh lochem. So again, I will say therefore in this area, there's one uniform halacha. What's the one uniform halacha? Relatives can't testify. Amarav Rav says as follows: Achi Abba lo yaedli. So Rav says like this: the father of my brother, which is my uncle, can't testify for me. Right? My uncle is disqualified from testimony. So the Gemara says, and that's not. And who's included in uncle? That's my uncle who Ubeno, my uncle's son, V'chasno, my uncle's son-in-law. And similarly again, Afani lo ayed lo. I, the nephew, also can't testify on behalf of my uncle, and that includes me, ani, ubini, and me, v'chasni, and my son-in-law. Va'amai, but I don't understand why is that? Havili shlishi berishon. So we'll say, if you notice, by the way, by the time you get to the end of this line, right, like a son-in-law, right? In other words, the nephew's son-in-law against the uncle, or for that matter, again, the uncle's son-in-law against the nephew. That's already like a third grade relative. So why can't the third grade relative go ahead and testify against the first grade relative? So the Gemara says, grade is maybe the wrong word, first level. So but we learned, sheni b'sheni tanan, right? What we'll call a second, and we'll define these terms just a little bit, but like a second level relative can't testify against another second level relative. So the Gemara says, va'ana sheni b'sheni tanan, sheni b'rishon tanan, shlishi b'rishon lo tanan. So what it says, we're going to see more closely related relatives, what Chazal call like a first level relative against a second level relative, or even a second level relative against another second level relative. I understand why these can't testify. But a shlishi b'rishon, so what it says, so just to illustrate this, once you talk about again that let's say the son-in-law of a nephew can't testify against an uncle, that's already multiple steps removed. So why can't those people testify, on behalf, against each other? So Gemara says, so my chasno, diktanim masnisin. What does it mean when we talk about the idea of a chasno? Chasan beno. It means the son-in-law of his son. His son's son-in-law can't go, which essentially would be like a grandson-in-law. Can't testify. Velisni ben beno. So why don't you just go ahead and write ben beno? Mil sagav archei kamash bolan. It's coming to teach us another lesson. What's the other lesson teaching us? The baal ki ishto, that a husband is treated like his wife. Ve'alaha detani, because we'll say the idea over here being that the son's son-in-law, right, has the status of the son because the husband has the status of the wife, who happens to be the daughter of the father. Ve'alaha detani Rabbi Chia, shmona avoshin esrim ve'arba. So I'll say, right, the takeaway message in all of this is anyone and everyone related to you in any way should not testify in your life. By the way, just so you think to yourself, you might be thinking to yourself, I'm so happy this is one thing that doesn't apply to me. So say, this does apply to you. This comes up all the time. It's chasanas, right? Again, by weddings, you have like a lot of testimonial stuff going on. Edei Tanaim, Edei Ksuva, Edei Kiddush, right? So the Klal Gadol is, if anyone is related to you in any way, we do not use them in any testimonial capacity. Again, even though, by the way, I want to point out that there does come a certain point in time, like let's say by third cousins, even by second cousins, that already you are far enough removed. But again, we're going to see that in general, the way, again, this is different. This is different because sometimes someone has testimony that you need. So we do have to know where it ends. But okay, so let's go ahead. Shmona says, Shmona avos shehin esrim va'arba. So you could have 8 fathers who represent 24 extended relatives. Sahani, so the Gemara says, if that's the case, but if you're going to go with even the son-in-law of the son, Hani Tlasin, so that's when you break out all of relatives, Hani Tlasin v'tartanavi, that would be 32. Elali olam chasno mamish. Rather, again, when we speak about son-in-law, we really mean, ultimately, again, the son-in-law. V'amai karile chasan beno. So why are we calling him the son-in-law of the son? Because since he's marrying into the family, right from outside, he's considered to be like a separate and distinct generation. But then once again, isn't that considered to be a third level relative, testifying against a second level relative? For Rav Achsher Shlishi B'Sheni, Rav said that a Shlishi could testify against or for a Sheni. Rav Damer Rebbe Lazar. Rav Lazar Rebbe Lazar, as well as the same Rebbe Lazar Omer, Kishem Sha'achi Abba Lo Yoidli, just like the father of my brother cannot testify for me. That means who's included in the brother of my father, which is my uncle. Just like my uncle can't testify, who's included in the prohibition of uncle? It's who? The uncle, Beno, the uncle's son, Chasno, and the uncle's son-in-law. So the Gemara says, Kach. So to, again, Abba says, so to me, the nephew, I also can't came, Kach ben achi abba lo yoeli. So to, again, the son of my uncle, i.e. my cousin, also can't testify on my behalf. Who? Ubenachas no. So I'll say this is dramatic. So I'll say, look what Rabbi Lazar is introducing over here. So Rabbi Lazar says, we know my uncle can't testify on my behalf. Rabbi say, now uncle we already know from the Mishnah. But Rabbi Lazar says, by the way, who else is included in my uncle? That's my uncle, right? That's my uncle, my uncle's son, and my uncle's son-in-law. Not only that, my cousin, the son of my uncle, also can't testify on my behalf. And who's included in my cousin? Who's included in my cousin? That's ultimately my cousin. Who? Beno, my cousin's son, and my cousin's son-in-law. Now I will say, by the way, cousin's son-in-law, I don't even know his name, right? Who's my cousin's son-in-law? So yet interestingly enough, now again in the whatever, don't make any judges about my family, okay? Right? But Lamaisa, because of that now expanded family tree, so that again we see how again this what we'll call disqualified Eidus pool is now expanding. Va'akati havele shlishi b'sheni. But I will say, but once again, if we're already getting into my cousin's son-in-law can't testify on my behalf, then those are already what we'll call third-level relatives. Can't testify against second-level relatives. We don't pass in that way. The Gemara says, "Rav achsher shlishi b'sheni, Rav savar lekavasi b'chada, upalegale b'chada." Okay, so Rav agrees with certain statements and disagrees with other statements. My time in Rav. What's Rav's logic? The Amakra lo yumsu avos albanim. The Gemara says ubanim l'rabos dor acher. So when the pasuk says that fathers shall not die, right, because of their sons, and when it says a different ubanim, that comes to include an additional generation. Rabbi Lazar albanim amrachmana psulei da'avos shadi abanim. So also Rabbi Lazar says like this: whatever disqualifications, and when we say disqualifications, we mean for testimonial purposes. Whatever familial disqualifications are on the father, those disqualifications are immediately passed down to their children. So, by the way, now once we say that, it actually makes a lot of sense. That's Rabbi Elazar saying like this. For me, right, my uncle can't testify against me. And when I say my uncle, it's my uncle's son, and my uncle's son-in-law. And now that my cousin, right, my uncle's son, which is my cousin, right, my cousin is not allowed to testify on my behalf. And by the way, now whoever is disqualified from whatever disqualification my cousin has is passed down to his kids also. That's why, again, my cousin's son and my cousin's son-in-law also can't testify on my behalf. That's Rabbi Lazar. So we'll say, so what we literally see over here, and this is a fundamental machlokes, Rabbi Lazar and Rav, about how far down these disqualifications actually go. Okay. Aram Nachman, Achi Chamosi, Lo Yarli. The brother of my father-in-law can't testify for me. And by the way, when we say testify, this is testify for me, testify against me. It doesn't make a difference. The brother of my father-in-law is not permitted to go out and testify on my behalf. Ben Achi Chamosi Lo Yarli. Similarly, again, the son of the brother of my father-in-law. My father-in-law's brother's son can't go ahead and testify on my behalf as well. Ben Achos Chamosi, the son of the daughter of my mother-in-law. Lo Ya'adli, V'tanatuna, we also learn this as well. Bal Achoso, Ubal Achos Aviv. So again, the husband of my sister, right? Or Bal Achos Aviv, or the husband of my father's sister. Ubal Achos Imor, the husband of my mother's sister. Hein Ubnehen V'chasnehen. These individuals, their children and their children-in-law are not permitted to testify on my behalf. Ravashi, ki avina be'ula. So Rashi like this: when I was in the house of Ula, so Ibailan, we asked the following kasha: Achi chamav mahu. What about the brothers of my father-in-law? What's their status? So the Gemara says, Ben achi chamav mahu. What about the son of the brother of my father-in-law? Ben achos chamav mahu, the son of the sister of my father-in-law, mahu. Amrlan, he said to us, so we learn this, achiv, vachi aviv, vachi imo, heinu b'nei v'chasnehan. So I say, so pretty much all these people will be disqualified, right? The brother of my father, the brother of my mother, them, their children, their sons-in-law are all disqualified to give Avis. Rav ikla lemizban amadezbosai. So Rav went to go ahead and purchase kvili. Kvili are klafim. So Rav went to purchase klaf, right? So again, that is not actually an important part of the story. What it's just saying is Rav is going out shopping. And I will say what happens, right? So again, Rav can't shop in peace. Because what happens when Rav goes to 7 Mile Market? So what happens, right? Rav goes, he's going out to buy parchments. So what happens? He gets stopped. They asked him, so is a person permitted to testify against his wife's stepson? Be'eshes chargo. I'm sorry. The wife of his stepson. Be'eshes chargo. So the Gemara says. So what is? Look at Rashi for just a moment. Now, what's the case of where a man would be testifying for his stepson's wife? So Rashi says, bishafta im adam min ashuk ubinashe shakro bim loibalan. So we'll say, so essentially, watch this. So essentially, a man, there's a court case, Reuven married Rachel. Rachel has a child from another marriage. That child got married. There's now a court case regarding the nichsim of the property of the stepson's wife. So is a stepfather permitted to go ahead and testify in the case of a stepson's wife? So the Gemara says, what's the halacha? So besura amri bal ki ishto, that a husband is like a wife. So therefore, I say essentially, the wife of a stepson is like who? It's like a stepson, and you can't testify regarding a stepson. Right, a stepson is still considered to be a relative, and therefore, halacha l'maisa, you can't go ahead and testify. Just like you can't testify, you can't be involved in testimony on the stepson's behalf. You also can't be involved in the testimony of the wife of the stepson. Pomadisa amru isha kebayla. So again, in Pomadisa, they said that a woman is like her husband. So the Gemara says, look at Rashi, Balki ishtovi isha kebayla v'hari ki ilu chamel. Fine. The Amar Rafuna Amar Rav Nachman minayin isha kebayla. From where do we know that a woman is treated the same way like her husband? In other words, we'll say status-wise, that essentially, again, the wife will have the same type of status as her husband, and therefore, in this case over here, because Reuven can't testify on behalf of his son-in-law, therefore he also can't testify on behalf of the wife of his son-in-law. T'chsiv ervas achi avicha lo sigala al ishto lo sikrav todaschahi. So the pasuk literally says again, the erva, the nakedness of achi avicha, of the brother of your father, you cannot uncover. El ishto lo sikrav, do not come close to his wife. This is the wife of this is the wife of the brother of your father, your uncle's wife. So the Gemara said, lo sikrav dodaschahi, she is your aunt. So the Gemara said, but she's not your aunt. She's not your aunt. Who's your aunt? Or we'll say, who's your aunt? Your aunt is the sister of your father or the sister of your brother. This is not your aunt. Valo eshes dodohi. This is the wife of your uncle. But rather, what do you see? Mechlal di isha kebayla. So we'll say what we see from here is that no, what halacha does is halacha treats the wife and gives her the same status as the husband. So in other words, interestingly enough, the wife of your uncle is your aunt. So in other words, that's not technically how we define an aunt, right? An aunt is defined as the father, as a sister of your mother, the sister of your brother. No, but you see from here the Torah treats the wife of your uncle like your aunt. So you see from here that a wife is given the status ultimately again of her husband. So therefore, halacha l'maisa, you can't testify on behalf of the wife of your stepson because she has the status essentially as your stepdaughter. This is your stepdaughter, and therefore halacha l'maisa you can't testify. I will say, it's interesting to note, why is that? Why does the Gemara have to tell us that Rav was shopping for parchments when he got asked that question? Who cares? Just tell us Rav was asked the question, and that's it. So say perhaps the shot is like this. Sometimes in life a person is doing something, and the truth is they just want to be left alone. Right? So, when you're shopping for parchments, all you want to do is just shop for parchments. You don't want to do anything else. You don't want to answer any questions, don't want to have any conversations. Just want to go ahead and maybe have a few minutes to shop for parchments. I will say, what do you see from here? When another Yid needs something, there is no such thing as being put upon. Another Jew needs something, it's never a hassle. It's never a bother. Maybe you could say, come on, wait till Rav gets back to the base medrash, send him an email. Don't write, but again, when another Jew needs something, again, I will say, the godless of the story is, Rav doesn't say, you know what, talk to me later, right? Rav deals with it then and there. When there's an opportunity to do something for someone else, opportunity to help someone else in some way, that is the greatest zechus in the world. Okay, now, maybe the person shouldn't have asked Rav the question right now, should have waited a little bit later. Okay, that's a different shaila. About having derech eretz of people, especially when you see that they're doing something else, that's a different issue. But once he did it, once he asked, again, you see the graciousness in which Rav dealt with it. Quite beautiful. All right, Gemara goes right there. Ubal imo, hu b'no v'chasno. So Gemara says, b'no, hainu achid. So again, I will say the way this is the son over here. The son is really his brother. So Rabbi Yomi lo nitzcha ela la'achi ha'ach. We're talking about again brothers. Sorry, brothers of your brother. So we'll say, so essentially, brothers of your brother would be an unrelated stepbrother. So someone who's a brother to my brother, but not related, not directly related to me. Rav Chisda, Rav Chisda said, no. The brothers of your brother, in other words, so people who are not related to me but are related to my brother, so those are kosher. Those really are totally unrelated to me, and therefore again kosher for edus. What about what Rabbi Yomi said? Right, Rabbi Yomi literally just said a line ago. Rabbi Yomi said that the brothers of your brother are disqualified. So now you're saying they're not disqualified. He said, I never heard that. But, yes, you did. Yeah, you just heard it. We just said it. Kilomar lo svirot. When he said I didn't hear it, it means not that I didn't hear it, but rather, I don't hold that way. So if that's the case, then again, so then the brother of my brother is the same thing as brother, so why do you even have to break out the cases? So Tana achiv min ha'av, v'katani achiv min ha'im. Okay, it's just breaking it up because it's talking about paternal brothers and maternal brothers. Amar Chisda, avi chasan, va'avi kala, mi'idin zelazah. I will say this is fascinating. Michutanim, right? So let's say again, Reuven marries Rachel. So Rachel has parents, right? Rachel has a father, and Reuven has a father. Reuven, right? Reuven's. So what is the Gemara saying? Reuven's parents and Rachel's parents are absolutely unrelated. You're like, I knew this my whole life, right? Like, are absolutely Michutanim are not related for these purposes over here. They are permitted to testify against each other. Now again, I'm using the word against, but you understand that I don't mean against. It just means testify. It could be for, it could be against. The idea means over here they could be involved in testimony that has an impact on the other because they are not considered to be related. So the Gemara says, "Avia chasam v'avia kala mi'idin zalzeh v'lo dami lahadad v'lo damu lahadadi ella." So the Gemara says, "Ella ki achla ledana." So this is such an interesting. So the Gemara says, "V'lo damu lahadadi." Lo damu lahadadi means that ultimately, again, they are not. Rashi says over here, "Lo damu Reuven v'Shimon lahadadi." They're not linked. They're not linked. So what are they compared to? Ella ki achla ledana. What are they compared to? They're compared to the lid of a barrel that doesn't fit on the barrel. So I was like, now again, so just understand what's being said over here. There's a number of fascinating lessons over here. So I'll say, so this is really incredible, which is so first of all, on just on a halachic level, what the Gemara is saying over here is they're not related, and therefore again, because there's really, and this is fascinating, again, I'm going to be honest, after all the people we just included in the relative pool, right? I would have thought for sure Nichutanim are in the relative pool. But again, because there is really there's something that links them, but not something that relates them. Therefore, they are permitted to testify, involving each other. So therefore the Gemara gives this lashon of they're like a lid of a barrel that doesn't quite fit on the barrel, meaning that there's really no connection between the two of them, even though their children are married. I will say there's also a really profound yisod in this, which I think Chazal are telling us, which is, sometimes in the world of marriage, in the world of shidduchim, people want everything to fit. They want the chassan and kala to be perfect with each other, and people have this image sometimes of this beautiful blended family where everybody loves each other and gets along with each other, which is beautiful. If that could happen, it's absolutely, and certainly it does happen. But Chazal are also telling us that that's not a prerequisite to happy and blissful marriage. If it happens, it's a bonus. But I think what Chazal is saying is more often than not, Michutanim are like the barrel and the lid that just don't quite fit together. And that's just because I will say the notion of blending two entire families is pretty uncommon that could actually happen. So if it happens, fantastic. But again, if it doesn't happen, it's okay also. That's not the ikr. The ikr is that the chassan and kala are able to build a beautiful and blissful life together. If the families are kind of awkward, right? And the families are the barrel and the lid that just don't fit together, it's fine. You know why? You're not even really related. Right? So because you're not really even related, it's okay. And we'll say it's such an important thing. Sometimes we make a very big deal about, we'll say, just as an aside, people like to talk about the shidduch crisis. I want to tell you something. There's no shidduch crisis. There's a people crisis, right? There's a people crisis that people often put emphasis on all the wrong things, that people focus on all the wrong things, that people are looking for all the wrong things. There's nothing wrong with the system. There's something wrong with people, Right? People create flawed systems. That's what ends up happening. If people correct themselves, have the right hashkafas hachayim, then ultimately everything else falls into place. So again, all about what we're looking for. But it's interesting to see that again, Chazal understood that sometimes the dynamics of blending two families together is virtually impossible. And the barrel doesn't fit with the lid, and the lid doesn't fit with the barrel. And Chazal say, you know what? All good. All good. All right, let's go back to Amar Rabbi Barachana. Meid Adam Ishtarusa. This is what I say, fasting halacha. A man could testify on behalf of his wife who is an arusa. So we'll say, so again, Ruvain did erisin with Rachel. And now what ends up happening? Halacha l'maisa, again, he could testify on her behalf. So the Gemara says, Amar Ravina, lo Amar, first white line, lo Amar el lafuke mine. That's only to extract money from her. In other words, he could testify against her. However, the Gemara says, aval li'iluyele lo mehemen. But to testify on her behalf, he can't do why. I'll say that's a conflict of interest. Why? Because halacha l'maisa, anything that she gains is what? Is going to become his. V'lohi, it's not true. Lo shna lafuke v'lo shna le'iluye lo mehemen. It's not true actually, regardless. Whether it's for or against her, he's not believed. My daitech. Arba sinot, we'll have to stop over here. All right, we made excellent ground. Excellent, we made good. Just remember where we start. I will say, it's not always about where you end. It's also about where you started. Right? We started in the middle of Am Yisroel essay, so we're going to be fine. Short daf tomorrow. We're good. We'll be fine. I think I have not failed you yet. I'll get you where you need to get you. Let's say shkayach. Sorry for today. All right, Chevra on Zoom. I feel like the Zoom Chevra has more faith in me than the in-person Chevra. All right, I'll say have a great day, everyone.